Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast, episode number 65, with Steve Robinson. Recorded this one a little while back after seeing the great work that Steve is doing with his End CC Stigma podcast, working to highlight the great work that community colleges are doing all across the country. So really was impressed with his show and came to learn that he's quite the avid podcaster and audio geek and just all around great guy. So really appreciate the time that I had with Steve to learn more about his story and what he's all about. So definitely check out all the cool stuff we mentioned in this episode down in the show notes, and really appreciate Steve taking some time out to record this episode, and definitely connect with him to keep the conversation going. So thank you so much for listening. And without further ado, this is episode number 65 with Steve Robinson. Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started here, and we'll start out as we always do. And I'll just say at the start here, really just appreciate you making time and talking about, your work and everything that you're doing. I sort of just stumbled across you through your efforts podcasting about ending community college stigma. So we'll definitely get to talking more about that and kind of your experience with podcasting so far. But yeah, we'll just start out as we always do, to have you introduce yourself and give a brief overview of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having me, Dustin. My professional journey in community colleges started when I was doing an internship at Lansing Community College. I was halfway through a master's degree in English literature, kind of wondering what I was going to do with that. I really loved it, but I tagged along with a buddy who was teaching at the local community college, and I had one of these lightning bolt, life-changing experiences. I just thought to myself, this is exactly what I want to do. So I went back to the English department, changed the focus of my master's degree, and I've been a community college person ever since. I started as an English professor. I was in the classroom for 15 years and did a number of administrative jobs after that. I was president of my faculty union for about 10 years, and I've just always been very much at home in the two-year college, community college setting.
Well, I guess if there's anything, because you mentioned like that happening more like in your graduate work, that transition and kind of the, just like you really found like a place to kind of commit to and do good work in the community college setting. But I'm curious if there's anything in addition to that really like pivotal moment for you. Like I always like hearing from people like what their like undergraduate college experience was like, because, those are the people that we're supporting. And it's always neat to hear people who go into higher ed or not, just like what their college experience was like, anything kind of formative from there, since I think it is just a very developmental moment for so many people. But yeah, anything that you look back on, any like memories, like any experience from college, personal, professional, like just community mentors or any sort of like lessons or things like that that still kind of are salient for you today.
Yeah, tons of them. I had a wonderful college experience. I wasn't a great high school student. I kind of got into my college by the skin of my teeth. I went to Michigan State University, ended up staying there for many, many years. I went off as a technical theater major because that was my passion as a high school student, and did a bunch of productions undergrad and then kind of changed my major. But to your question, I actually credit a mentor with getting me through my baccalaureate work. As a complete beginner, I started music lessons in the music department and studied the double bass. And I had not played an instrument before. The double bass professor at Michigan State took me on as a beginner, and he was my de facto mentor, even though I was only a music minor. He was the person that I, sounded off about frustrations, and I ended up taking lessons with him, all the way through my master's program. I actually took a break between bachelor's and master's to play in a band, work in a music store, that kind of thing. But it was my mentorship with Peter Dominguez, the professor of double bass. He's now at Oberlin, probably getting close to retirement. He's a great guy. And I loved Michigan State. There's something about a big state university, a research university where there are little pockets where you can be yourself and do things like I did in theater and music, but big enough that it kind of feels like the world. My wife also went to Michigan State, and we we joke that one of the things we learned at Michigan State is that there are lots of people in the world, and you're not incredibly special. Right? There's another one of you right around the corner, and you kind of have to make things happen for yourself.
Right. I think that's somebody I worked with who has lived and worked in New York City for a very long time. It's like the idea of like there's always somebody doing like better than you and worse than you. So it's that idea of just like kind of being like very humble. Yeah, it's like any moment, because I'm like humble to a fault, but like I think it's important for us to have that, and maybe just like knowing that you kind of have to work for what you get, and those sort of like not. I don't know. Yeah, it's just a very good sentiment. Just funny. Yeah, like sort of a very different way of getting to a similar feeling. But
that's how I felt at a big state university, and I am still in touch with a lot of people I went to college with. And for some things, there's an incredible amount of competition. One of my passions as an undergrad was student radio, and so I had a program on the FM station. But it took me 3 years to get there. It was highly competitive. Had to do a show on cable FM and kind of prove myself, work my way up, and it was a formative experience for me. I really did have a great college experience.
Awesome. Well, I hope we will maybe talk a little bit more about like music. It sounds like it might be something that you kind of just like geek out about.
Absolutely.
But I guess, yeah, I mean, that kind of gives like a kind of formative background throughout a lot of your experiences before starting this work that you've been doing for a while in a lot of different ways within the community college setting. So I think just whether you want to kind of dig into different pieces throughout your tenure or anything just more recently with your current role of just like, what do you enjoy most about your current work? And maybe this is, where the podcast comes in. I mean, we can talk about that too, so if there's anything else. But I mean, yeah, like what do you enjoy most about your current work that keeps you kind of energized to come back at it every day?
Well, I'm fortunate to have pretty much been in love with every job I've had in the community college, and I've had several. I started working at a community college when I was 24, so more than half of my life I've been working in this setting, and whatever role I had seemed to fit where I was in life. And so I've been a college president for 2 years. And I love this job. It's a great job. And one of the things that really attracts me to this kind of work is the incredible diversity of, what my calendar's like, what my inbox is like. I mean, I don't spend a ton of time at my desk. I'm walking around campus. I'm going off to community meetings, building relationships, which is kind of interesting from a life journey for me. When I first started off as a classroom teacher, even though I was outgoing enough to teach, I wasn't the person who would, shake hands and work the room and do all that kind of stuff. And my job now requires that. So it's kind of fits where I am right now. We have a lot of great things going on in our community and in Ohio regarding community colleges. And one thing I love about community colleges is we really have a lot of allies around in all kinds of spaces. Education, higher education is very political, but community college is kind of not very partisan. We've got friends in both of the two major parties, and it's very rare that some kind of partisan issue derails a community college issue. And so the civic life, the dealing with faculty, dealing with interesting problems that come up, I wake up excited to solve the puzzle of what the day is going to bring.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's just like literally in the name kind of thing, it's just like very community oriented and building those relationships. And, it's the idea that education as it being, like an equalizer, it's like it doesn't discriminate. Like anybody can come in and work towards whatever goals that they're hoping to achieve, and hopefully, kind of build some community while they're at it. And because like you said, I mean, wherever students go, it's like more often than not, it's like people do make like, these lifelong friendships or build like mentorships and those sort of things. So like community in a lot of senses for literally like kind of just the whole neighborhood and on a more individual level and all those sort of things. I can definitely see why that would be definitely an exciting and energizing kind of part of your work. And I guess also too, I mean, just you being really committed to this segment of higher education and getting into that podcast like we're talking about, I guess it's, that you would have a little bit of kind of leeway to experiment and do these sort of things where, you are sort of putting yourself out there, putting your institution on the map, on one hand, if it's, I don't know if you're getting kind of just like free clearance to do that, or if you're at least kind of working with any colleagues to kind of control messaging. Because I know you're really like, I think it's always a good sign of a good podcast. I think you're definitely putting the spotlight more so on other folks to speak and kind of talk through things. But I guess, yeah, like what was that experience of like getting that started and doing it as like, something that I know you're kind of, I guess, working on, I think season 2, right? Like that should be coming soon. Right. Like just like kind of where you see it going and I guess, yeah, how it got started.
Yeah, there's a lot embedded in what you brought up there, and it's cool. So a couple pieces. One is it's only been a couple of years, but this is the first role that I've had where I really didn't have to go and get somebody's clearance or sign off to do it. It's like, as being the chief executive of the organization, it's not, a unilateral, I'm going to do whatever the heck I want, but there isn't a committee or a boss I have to go before. I have to think of, the 9 trustees and then the culture of our college. But one thing about that is we have a brand new strategic plan at our college. And one of the 20 key objectives is to do some image management for our institution and for community colleges in general. And this term community college stigma is actually in our strategic plan. So when I'm doing the podcast, I'm really doing the work of the institution. Another thing, we just recently revised our vision statement. One of the vision statements is to become a premier community college, and that means kind of getting some national exposure for raising an issue. So the success of the podcast, the great interest in dealing directly with community college stigma I think it's really propelling our strategic planning work forward. And then you couldn't be more right about highlighting the voices of other people. That podcast, the Community College Stigma podcast, actually has a mission statement, which is, to amplify the voices of people who are using social media to push back on community college stigma and create a more accurate view of America's community colleges. So it's a voice amplification message. And that's what's going to happen in season 2. We're going to try to do even more to create dialogue and highlight different voices.
Yeah, because I think I talk about this a fair bit with other people who podcast, and just like with the boom that it's had in the past several years, it's fairly transparent, I think, when it is a very like kind of ego-serving endeavor for people. Like, so like I kind of get turned on. Like they can still be entertaining, but I think it always kind of has that little kind of asterisks on it where it's just like, okay, this is like a vanity project, seeing, I guess, more so with like celebrity and people and like entertainment and stuff. But because at the core of it, the medium, I know I've just been a fan of it for so long, and using it in the ways like you're doing to just like really like literally voice it, it's just somebody's voice. They're just speaking to something and just being able to help provide a platform and have really good dialogues and discussions and talk about important things, but doing it in a really engaging and relevant way. I'm just always a supporter of. So I'm glad that you decided to dive in. I guess I'm curious. Like you said, like you had experience with radio, and I feel like because I dabbled with it in high school, so it sort of like scratches that itch of always like enjoying sort of like content creation or just audio recording and that sort of stuff. So do you feel like it sort of like hits another thing like that of just like you've always kind of been into this sort of stuff, so it sort of just manifested as like because you could do video, you could do blogging, you could do like any form of like content creation. So did like podcasting stick out in particular for sort of like your past experiences?
It did for a couple reasons. So I mentioned undergrad, I did a lot of music, and when I was a faculty member and even a dean, I found time to be in a band here or there, but since I became a provost and now the president, I just really don't have any time to play out, but I love to mess around with wires and microphones and all kinds of stuff like that. So this is a great outlet for that. And actually, I kind of credit the students at Owens Community College for getting me back into audio production because it's a short story, but it's worth telling. I'm a vinyl record fanatic. I've got a program on the student radio station called the Vinyl Hour where all I do is play vinyl records. And that was the students' idea because we had a record store owner here in Toledo who tragically passed away. And so I did like an hour radio tribute to him. I sent it over to the students and they were really sweet. They said, this is like one of the coolest things we have. You need to turn this into a regular program. Oh. So I started that program, and then that got me, back into this. I started a podcast that I do specifically for faculty and staff on our campus. It's a kind of a campus engagement podcast. And then when we started using social media on the community college stigma issue, I was having these phone calls and email exchanges, and the power came from other people's voices. And I thought, well, geez, I could write this. I have a blog I keep at the college. I could have put it on there. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be great to hear all these different voices from all over the country? And so, in Community College Month, which is April, I set out to do 4 short podcast episodes, and that just wasn't enough time with all the people who wanted to connect with me. So we did 6 hour-long podcasts. I had 40 different guests in that 1 month. It was a marathon from 15 states, 27 different organizations. And immediately when we were done, I started getting contacted about, well, what are you going to do next? When is this going to happen again?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great podcast.
Yeah, it's fun.
I think,
it's fun.
Yeah. And I guess too, you've had because I mostly record with people over Skype, and I've had the few opportunities to record with people in person. But it sounds like because you've interviewed people like your institution or just other places by the sounds. Because I know sometimes it's always hard. It's never going to be the same in terms of just different things when you're recording over Skype. But it seems like you know so many people, and you have so many people that are great for it at work at your institution. So yeah, I'm sure it's just no shortage of guests, and then just being able to grab time with people either locally or virtually, and mixing them together to really amplify all those voices. It's so great. So it's really cool.
I had
to see.
fun doing it. A lot of the calls, a lot of them were phone calls, and if you listen to the podcast, some of the most of the audio is pretty good. I did a good job of, I think, cleaning up some of the phone calls and getting the mix minus working. I mean, there's some technical podcasting stuff. You have to do that. We'll probably do some Skype in season 2. My co-host Rachel James and I we're going to try to do what you and I are doing, or we'll do some double enders where we either have the guest go to the media folks in their organization and get some technical help, and I'll let you know how this goes. I've got this grand scheme to just send them a nice Zoom digital recorder. They're so cheap now, with return postage, and have them just send it back to me because the audio is just so much better. The episodes where I was able to get a high quality recording of the other guest or meet with them in person, it felt a lot better.
Yeah, I mean that's a very clever idea. Yeah, I'd be very curious to hear how that might work out. Because it's which again, part of the beauty of the podcast, I think people are willing to tolerate a little bit of audio hiccups, or just it's not pristine high end quality. As long as the content's really good, I think people will and it's not even suffering. It's just okay, it's clearly different. It sounds like a phone call. People are used to that. You listen to NPR or something, they're bringing people in really on the fly. But even just that ounce of it's sort of something oh, we're just mailing it and we got to get it back or whatever. Which I guess is a little bit more of an ounce. It's more maybe kind of a pound of effort or whatever. That really shows up, in the audio quality, like you're saying. I mean, and it just making sure that the voice that you're amplifying is coming through as loud and clear as possible, certainly worthwhile, whatever way it can work out. Because, I guess the other method is most institutions will have some sort of optimal setup for people to, record one way or another, a soundproof room or anything. Yeah, just renting a microphone or something, So yeah, that'd be great just to like help coordinate, because I've just gotten into like a rhythm of like just being like, just as long as you like use some headphones or something, like you don't like, like I'm not trying to like, put upon people too much, but yeah, in some instances, like I wish I did, because like it's a really great episode, but there's some audio stuff. So yeah, that's great.
Well, not everybody finds this stuff as fun as you and I do. So with the challenge is making it easy for them. So the 2-part strategy, and I'll let you know how it goes. One, if we're talking to folks at colleges or big nonprofits, and that's where, our next episodes are going to have a single anchor guest, and then we're going to have a number of student interviews. And so the idea is to, if possible, get that person to reach out to their tech or media folks. And I put together a half-page spec sheet about what we need from them. And anybody who deals with this kind of stuff will look at that and say, oh yeah, we can do that. But if this isn't your hobby, doing it yourself, would seem daunting. So I'm going to experiment with this, $100 Zoom H1, just put it in the mail, return label. And then as we're, getting going, just sort of coaching them on how to set it up. And then when we're done, just tuck it in the box and send it back. I'm crossing my fingers. I hope it'll work.
Yeah. Well, best of luck with that. It's a good plan, but yeah, it's just like hoping that it was like, oh, I need it for somebody else, and you haven't mailed it back yet or got lost or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I guess, it's clear, like, yeah, you kind of geek out about, like, good audio quality and, like, music and vinyl and that kind of stuff. So I guess if you want to speak to just, like, anything else maybe that you're geeking out about or digging in with any of those things, because I'm sure there's maybe just kind of some anecdotes of what those passions and those interests have meant for you in terms of, like, community or anything like that. But, yeah, just, like, I guess talking through, the stuff that you're, like, geeking out about right now.
Well, a lot of it, we were talking about podcasting. I mean, I do have sort of a studio set up in my outer office at the college, and that's where I do this podcast that I call Teachable Moment. So far, I've only had faculty on, but I really want staff members to come on. The idea of that podcast is a member of our campus community comes on the show and teaches me an idea from her or his area of expertise. So I've had like a psychologist came on, taught me about people first language and the disability community, had a geographer come on teaching me this core concept from intro geography called cultural hearth. And it's a great way to do two things. One is to connect with the people on our campus, because we have phenomenal folks. And then the second piece is to kind of promote them. A couple of these podcasts have been good enough that these faculty want to put them in their Blackboard shells to, use them as supplemental instruction for their students. So, and then recently, one of the things I've been getting more and more into audio editing, which I used to find really tedious. But I'll give you one interesting thing I geeked out about this week with our folks. Our media folks are doing a new student orientation video. We're going to be doing our new student orientation a little differently. And they want to have it's like a 3-minute intro with me as a talking head at the beginning. And we've got a great videographer. He's awesome. He put a lav mic on me and we're like walking across campus. And when we were done, I said, I've been doing a lot of audio post-production. And if you want, I can take one of my nicer microphones and re-record some of this. And his eyes lit up. Said, oh, that would be so cool. So actually he sent me this is very geeky. He sent me the lav mic output from the camera video shoot, and I recreated it here at home and sent it to him. But I actually had to, make sure that it was exact, because he's going to, sync it up with, my moving image in the video, and that's not exactly easy. So I can't wait to see what that's like. So just that, and I'm always playing around with record setup. I do this vinyl record show, always trying to find some better way to do it with, I've got turntables and speakers and that kind of stuff all over the place.
Yeah. And I think because like in high school, what I did was like, it was like a technical high school, and you chose sort of like what your sort of shop class, would be. And it was radio TV is what I chose. And when I went to college, I just took like, intro to film and like a couple different film classes. And I've just always kind of like geeked out about those sort of things of like doing that, like, because I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but it's like ADR, like that, like kind of like post-production audio recording and stuff. And like sometimes there's just like those instances where it's like really bad, but like the idea is like there's so much value of just like, again, like high quality audio, like making sure that like you can be understood, and it's just like, yeah, you're recording outside, you're getting all the background noise or, anything like that. So, yeah, I'm sure just like, anytime you do any sort of video producing, it's like, you don't know where anybody's at on the spectrum of just like understanding like what it takes to have good audio quality or video quality and those sort of things. So it's, yeah, I'm sure anybody that you're working with is very grateful for your kind of, enthusiasm and interest and just knowledge of just, committing to making all of this content high quality. So,
yeah, and they do a great job. I mean, I'm really lucky to have really talented media folks at our college, and so this is a way where I could kind of collaborate with them. And it's interesting too because one of the things I've been doing lately, I gave a talk at the NISOD conference about podcasting. And to me, this stuff is more about technique than the actual gear. I mean, the microphone I'm talking through right now is not a high-end microphone, but at my presentation in Austin, I put a picture of a Neumann U87, the NPR microphone. I said, look, here's a $4,000 microphone or a $3,200 microphone, and you could have your own radio station for that amount of money now.
Uh-huh.
I'm starting to work with some local activists who've built a FM low power station, and it's just amazing what people can do with pretty bare bones technology. So it's more about using this gear the right way rather than having this high end gear.
Uh-huh. Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess then I'm curious. It was just like asking people, what they're reading, watching, and or listening to. So, yeah, anything that's just like grabbing your attention that you might want to recommend folks to check out.
Well, since we've been talking podcasting, I have to admit that I'm not a voracious podcast listener, but I have been probably since the beginning of the medium, listening to a little bit of it. And whenever anybody asks me that question, I like to highlight a little podcast that I love called Philosophy Bites. Philosophy Bites is a philosophy podcast out of England, put together by Nigel Warburton and David Edmonds. And it was kind of the inspiration for Teachable Moment. The podcasts are never longer than 15 minutes, and they always have one prominent philosopher, academic philosopher, on to talk about a very limited idea in philosophy. So, for example, like a particular thought experiment from Plato's Republic, or something really small, bite-sized, so they can dig in. And I just think that's a great way to explore an idea, is through dialogue and with back and forth. And so they've been doing that podcast since, it's really been around for a long time. It's proliferated to other projects that are podcasts. But listeners who are interested in philosophy would probably really love Philosophy Bites. I listen to that pretty regularly. I also like this new Broken Record podcast that Malcolm Gladwell has done with Rick Rubin. I don't know if you've listened to it. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I just listened to an episode of the Revisionist History podcast that he does.
Right.
So yeah, there's several episodes of that one. So. Yeah, it's cool to see that he's kind of getting into podcasting a little bit more. Like it's just neat, like witnessing when certain like notable people are like catching the bug. Like they're just really getting into the format and investing in it. So always a good thing. But yeah, we'll definitely include links out to those. And
yeah, those are good ones.
Yeah.
Those are good ones. I'm trying to think of other things. At this time of we've got a lot of things going on at the college, in particularly, and we've got the biennial budget going through in Columbus. So I haven't had a lot of time to sit and read. I am reading the Mueller report. I got through volume 1. It occurred to me that it's something that a citizen ought to do, right? I remember when I think my grandparents read the Warren report when it came out, and so it seemed like something to civically educate yourself. So I've read volume 1 so far, the Mueller report.
Wow.
But apart from that, I'm just mostly buried in work.
Yeah, I feel like that's like tragically how it goes sometimes. I'm just like, whether we're in school or just have to like read a lot for work or whatever, like I know I find it hard to find time to like read purely for pleasure. And but certainly kudos to you for reading like the primary document that many people are just like now commenting on. It's like, I'm sure many people may have not actually read the entire thing. So
I'd like to be, when I'm old, I want to be able to say, well, yeah, I read that.
Yeah.
And like I said, it reminds me of other primary documents that, people talk around, but, haven't read. And I'll just say this for volume 1, it's fairly well written. It was a big undertaking to do that investigation. Volume 1 is just about the Russian interference in the election. I haven't gotten to the other pieces, but it's very thorough.
Interesting. Well, I guess then we can wrap up with the optimistic end note that I always like to kind of conclude with here. So, something or things that you're looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world. I guess just whatever comes to mind.
Okay, well, a few. I'm a very optimistic person, so I'm always looking forward to things. But I gave this some thought. There are a couple things I'd like to highlight. And your listeners, even the ones who aren't in Ohio, might be really interested in this. So on July 3rd, which is coming up, the state law in Ohio will officially recognize something that's called the dynamic symbol of accessibility. And I'm sure you're familiar with the sort of wheelchair icon that you'll see on accessible parking signs and hang tags and accessible bathrooms. Well, a team of designers about 10 years ago redesigned that icon to from kind of a people first perspective, to give it a sense of forward motion and activity. It's a really cool redesign. It still looks like a person in a wheelchair, but the person has their arms cocked back like they're moving and they're leaning forward. And a couple of states in the United States have adopted this instead of the older symbol, New York and Connecticut, and Ohio just did that. And it's something I've been paying attention to for a long time. So as silly and small as it seems, I'm really excited that the state law in Ohio has pivoted away from using the word handicap on these spots, and also adopted this new dynamic symbol of accessibility. And so that's very fresh and something I've been following for a long time, kind of exciting. And if you live in another part of the country, be watching for it. You'll see it. It's kind of cool. And I'll send you a link. The icon actually was the subject of an exhibit at the MoMA in New York City a few years ago. It's a really great piece of kind of grassroots graphic design that has taken hold. I think there's some provinces in Canada that have adopted it as well. So that's one thing. And then we talked about another thing I'm really excited about. We're going to be gearing up next month to produce the second series of the Community College Stigma podcast. And been really thoughtful about how to do things differently. Before it was just me talking to people. So now I'm going to have a co-host, Rachel James, who works at the Aspen Institute. She's a community college graduate, and we're going to kind of do this together. She'll interview anchor guests, I'll interview students, and then we'll kind of unpack the episode together in dialogue. And so I'm really excited to get that going.
Very cool. Yeah. All good stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's something I remember seeing, I think, when that accessibility logo changed. And I guess, yeah, like having it have to very, like, it's taken probably a long time just over different localities or states or different things, like just norming it and making it something that people are committing to using. So,
right. And it's not without controversy. Like anything that matters, there are going to be people on both sides of the issue. So the new icon actually has some detractors, has some critics, and it's interesting. I just I just did a bunch of tweets about this, and folks in the disability community in different parts of the world got involved in the discussion. It's all civil, but the whole focus on people first language or identity first language, and then this icon, really sparks conversation. That's my favorite part of it, is that, these are issues that are best explored in dialogue, and not everybody's coming from the same place. It's not like the old icon is bad and the new one is good. But, all of these symbols, just like language, are imbued with meaning. And so having dialogue about it's really cool. So that's one of the things I'm excited about.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like it's probably like one of those things, like, because it's always like, it always comes up and it like annoys me, is that like the idea of changing like team names to be more like inclusive from like, Native American imagery and like any of those things. I feel like people will always on the other side of that be like, but it'll cost so much to change the signs. And I'm like, is that really your biggest concern? Like the one-time cost of like changing signs is like enough to just be like, we shouldn't even do it. It's not even worth it. Like, so it's, at the very least, like if they feel that way and then are hopefully willing and comfortable to engage in dialogue, it's like, it's like that's where the change happens. It's just like people talking and, better understanding where each other is coming from. And, hopefully people are, in the world right now, the perception or, people I think talk about how much that happens less or doesn't happen as often as it should. But I think, again, being the optimist, it's like, if you're putting out your feelings and your thoughts and, just some forward progress that's happening. Just hoping, I guess, to, try to inspire some change or some shifts in opinion or whatnot. But
the interestingly enough, the Ohio law kind of envisions that expensive sign change. It's written in such a way that it's all new signage will adopt the new language and the new symbol. So there's a way to mitigate those kinds of concerns that folks have. What's interesting to me is that there's such a diversity of opinion on issues like this, and I think that's great. In fact, one of the Teachable Moment podcast episodes I did with a faculty member, we talked. She's the person who taught me about the people first language, and really did a deep dive into how there are certain communities where those communities are split on whether they would use identity first language or people first language, and we take these things really seriously. So, and that's good, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important. I think something that's always on my mind is just sort of like kind of always forward, like always just like, even if it's incremental steps or just like, I don't know, trying to, just help things along in the right direction. Like you're saying, it's not as if it's going to be this like monumental endeavor to change all signs everywhere. It's like, at least just to start, all new ones are going to be different. And then eventually, like, we will get to changing the old ones, like, because, it's like, sure, that is a concern. If it's like, if we had to coordinate to immediately make signage changes across an entire state or something, it's just like, I mean, that would be a lot. But, there's like a compromise of like, we'll do it in a common sense way, like we're not going to, put ourselves out too much just to immediately make the change. But it is, even then, like, symbolic in two ways. Like, it's literally a symbol and the meaning that's in that symbol, but like a symbolic effort of just like, this is very much a values thing that we want to commit to at this higher level, and just make that very apparent, very cool. All good stuff. And I think that's just a very good kind of optimistic thing to look forward to and always kind of find some kind of inspiration with. And I mean, I wish you the best of luck getting season 2 of the podcast going here soon. And
well, thank you, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
Always good talking to another higher ed podcaster, and I have ways to connect with you and the work that you're doing and all the stuff that you mentioned down in the show notes. But just thanks again for your time. This podcast is part of the Connect EDU podcast network, bringing together diverse voices in the higher ed community. Check us out on Twitter at ConnectEDUPod or at connectedu.network. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.